There's a lot of sport played in schools these days. This is James. His favourite sport is netball. At James's school, girls and boys play in the same teams, even when they play against other schools. Sport and exercise were very different when James's dad and granddad were at school.
We didn't have a sports day. I think the nearest we got to a sports day was at the end of the year when we had a whole school picnic.
These children are trying some of the sports Victor can remember. Wheelbarrow races, tunnel ball, and sack races. A lot of fun, but very different from the sports played in schools these days. In the 1970s, when James's dad was at primary school, boys and girls would not have played in the same team.
All the boys played boy sports and all the girls played girl sports. So, consequently, the girls played netball and the boys played either soccer or rugby.
When I was your age and going to school, the empire was very, very important to Australia. The king and the empire. It was King George VI in those days. So we started our school day with the pledge. I honour my God, I serve my king, I salute the flag.
When Victor was at school, a lot of Australians felt very close to Britain, and the King of Britain, King George, who was also our king. At that time, most Australians, or their ancestors, came from Britain. Most classrooms had a picture of the king. When he died in 1952, his daughter Elizabeth became our queen.
Full flag ceremony about. Turn. Boys, right hand.
In those days, morning assembly at most schools included a pledge to the Queen.
I honour the flag.
I honour the flag.
I will serve the Queen.
I will serve the Queen.
And cheerfully obey.
And singing the national anthem. It used to be God Save the Queen, which was the British national anthem. But many Australians wanted us to have our own national anthem, so in 1984 it was changed to Advance Australia Fair. These days, some schools also have a school pledge, but there's usually no mention of the Queen.
We will now recite the school pledge. Repeat after me. I'll try to be clean and tidy.
I'll try to be clean and tidy.
Both in myself and in my surroundings.
Both in myself and in my surroundings.
To be polite.
To be polite.
Helpful.
With students coming from so many different countries, the links with Britain are no longer as important for many Australians. Classrooms have also changed. These days, boys and girls sit together. Desks are often arranged in interesting ways.
Remember now.
We expect to hear lots of discussion and see all sorts of books and equipment in the room. And students are generally encouraged to ask questions and to talk to their teachers.
When I was going to school, there wasn't any freedom like you have in your class today. You could say that we were always scared of our teachers. And all the desks were in nice orderly rows. They were straight down, straight up and down and straight across. I think it was the case of sit down, shut up and listen. If you were caught talking, you were caned.
Yeah, the cane was still around when I was at school. A cane for fighting, cane for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just little things. I'd call them little.
The cane is no longer used in schools, but it was used a lot when Victor and John were at school. Most schools had a punishment book that recorded who got the cane and why.
Sydney Gregg, age 9.5, laziness, 1 hit. Athol Davis, age 7, cheating, 2 hits. Roy Davis, age 10, untidiness, 2 hits.
There was a great insistence on neatness. And if your work was untidy, well, that was another reason for the cane.
When Victor started school in the 1940s, he wrote on a slate board with a slate pencil. Slate's a type of rock. Paper was expensive. To clean the slate, he used a damp rag. It wasn't until children were in about year 3 that they were allowed to use pen and ink and write on paper. Because beautiful, neat writing was a sign of a well-educated person, a lot of time was spent getting the shape of each letter perfect. This meant a lot of copying. The top line of the page had already been printed, and you had to copy it as perfectly as possible down the page. Blotting paper was used to soak up the moisture. Otherwise, the wet ink might smudge, and you'd get into trouble for messy work.
If you wanted to really have some real fun, you put blowflies in the inkwell or tore up your blotting paper and stuffed it in the inkwell so that when the person went to write, stuck the pen into the inkwell and there would be a blowfly or a piece of blotting paper on there. And sometimes you couldn't pull all of the blowfly or the blotting paper off, and when you went to write, it made a mess of your writing. And that was another good reason for the teacher calling you out and giving you so many cuts.
Well, I always remember maths. Maths was fairly one of my favourite subjects. We'd sit in the class, we'd do our maths, we remember sitting down there reciting our times tables like parrots.
And there were competitions to see who could remember their tables quickly.
Right, think about it, boys. 5 tens. 50. 10 fives. 50.
Like his dad, James loves maths. He also enjoys learning about Aboriginal people.
High school.
Victor is from the Ourhistory Nation, so when James's class was learning about Aboriginal people, Victor was invited to talk about his life and to teach some of his language.
So I can say, James Galamaya Ngay. James Galamaya Ngay. James is my grandson.
When Victor was at school in the 1940s, Aboriginal people were not considered to be as good as white people. Many Aboriginal children weren't even allowed to go to the same schools as white children, and if they spoke their Aboriginal languages, they often got the cane. So many never learnt to speak their languages and were made to feel ashamed of being Aboriginal.
Baba Bulwithimba. 1, 2, 3. Baba Bulwithimba, Yamanginda Durham, Ngawawa, Mangaguliba.
A lot has changed since James's dad and granddad were at school.
To order a custom copy of this series, call ABC Commercial on 1300 650 587.